There is a city on this earth that is doing something no city has ever attempted at this scale. It is not tearing down a building here, or a neighborhood there. It is tearing down itself. 1.5 million homes. 60% of its entire housing stock marked for demolition. 6.5 million dwellings to be replaced across the country over 20 years. Not because of a war, not because of a flood, not because of an order from an occupying power, but because the earth beneath this city is alive, and it is restless. This is the story of the most ambitious urban rebuilding project in the history of the modern world. To understand why Istanbul is being demolished and rebuilt, you first have to understand the ground it sits on. Beneath Istanbul, beneath the Bosphorus, beneath the Sea of Marmaray, runs one of the most dangerous geological features on the planet, the North Anatolian Fault. A 1,200-kilometer fracture in the Earth's crust, where the Eurasian and Anatolian tectonic plates grind against each other, slowly, relentlessly, building pressure decade after decade. On the 17th of August, 1999, the world saw what that pressure looks like when it releases. The Izmit earthquake, magnitude 7.6, 17,000 people killed, over 100,000 homes destroyed, economic losses estimated at over $12 billion. And geologists said the same thing after 1999 that they still say today. Istanbul is next. The probability of a major earthquake hitting Istanbul, a city of 16 million people, before the year 2050 is estimated at between 62 and 70%. But here's the problem that kept urban planners awake at night. Before the transformation began, 60% of Istanbul's buildings were substandard. Informal constructions, built fast, built cheap, built without permits, without engineering oversight, without any consideration for the geological reality beneath them. They had a name for these buildings, gecekondu, meaning put up overnight, built so quickly, so informally, they seemed to appear overnight. And an entire city had been built on top of them, 16 million people, living inside structures that, in the event of a major earthquake, would simply cease to exist. The government faced a choice: do nothing, and wait for a catastrophe that scientists said was virtually inevitable, or do something that had never been done before. They chose to rebuild the city, all of it. In 2012, the Turkish government passed Law No. 6306, the Anti-Seismic Urban Transformation Law, and with it, one of the most sweeping demolition and reconstruction mandates in the history of urban planning anywhere in the world was set in motion. The law gave authorities the power to identify risky buildings, notify owners, and if necessary, demolish structures without waiting for a court order if lives were at immediate risk. It gave property owners a window of just 90 days to begin demolishing their own risky buildings. It created a legal framework to relocate residents, compensate them with rental support during construction, and ensure the land was rebuilt to new earthquake-resistant standards. At the center of this effort is AFAD, the Disaster and Emergency Management Authority, working alongside the Ministry of Environment, Urbanization and Climate Change, and TOKİ, Turkey's public housing authority, one of the largest housing developers on Earth. The scale of what has already been accomplished is staggering. Istanbul alone has completed the transformation of over 924,000 independent housing units, nearly 1 million homes rebuilt from the ground up. And work continues on an additional 263,000 units. To put that in perspective, Istanbul has rebuilt more homes in the last decade than most countries build in a generation. And Istanbul is just one city. Across Turkey, the target is 6.5 million dwellings, a number so large it is almost impossible to visualize. When people talk about earthquake-resistant buildings, they often talk about Japan. Japan's seismic engineering is considered the gold standard of the world. After World War II, Japan rebuilt its cities under 3 tiers of earthquake protection. They called them Taishin, the minimum standard, with reinforced beams and columns. Seishin, energy-absorbing dampers installed at every floor. And Menshin, total seismic isolation, separating the building from the ground itself using layers of lead, steel, and rubber. Turkey's 2018 Building Earthquake Code, the TBDY 2018, prepared by AFAD and published in the Official Gazette on the 18th of March 2018, made legally mandatory from the 1st of January 2019, incorporates all 3 of these philosophies. 120 experts contributed to the code. It consists of 17 chapters. It introduced entirely new standards for high-rise buildings, seismically isolated structures, timber buildings, cold-formed steel buildings, categories that simply didn't exist in the previous 2007 code. Let me explain what is actually inside these new buildings being constructed across Istanbul. Seismic isolation systems. Installed between the building's foundation and the building itself. These are flexible pads made of alternating layers of rubber and lead. When the earth moves, the pads move with it, but the building above them moves far less. This technology reduces shaking by up to 5 to 6 times compared to a building without it. During the 2023 earthquakes in southern Turkey, hospitals built with this system, including Adana City Hospital, recorded a 75% reduction in shaking compared to surrounding structures. They stayed operational while everything around them was in ruins. Seismic dampers. Installed at every floor of a building, these devices work like shock absorbers in a car. They absorb the energy of an earthquake and convert it into heat, dissipating the force before it can damage the structure. They prevent the kind of progressive floor-by-floor pancake collapse that killed thousands in the 1999 quake. Performance-based design. Under TBDY 2018, buildings aren't just designed not to fall. They are designed for what engineers call functional recovery, meaning after a major earthquake, the building doesn't just stay standing, it stays usable. Hospitals can continue treating patients. Offices can reopen within days. Families don't have to abandon their homes. New seismic hazard maps. AFAD developed entirely new probabilistic seismic hazard maps, made publicly available, that analyze risks street by street, district by district across Turkey. Every new building in Istanbul is designed specifically for the soil conditions and fault proximity of its exact location. Building usage categories, BKS. Hospitals, schools, emergency services, and government buildings are designed to higher safety classes than standard residential buildings, ensuring that the infrastructure that matters most during a disaster is the most protected. The additional cost of all this seismic protection? Typically less than 5% of construction cost. 5% more to build a home that can survive a major earthquake. 5% more to protect a family's life. 5% more compared to the $84 billion in losses the 2023 earthquake cost the country. The maths is undeniable, and Istanbul is doing the maths. go to the specific places where this transformation is most visible, where entire districts have been erased and are being reborn. Fikirtepe, located in the heart of Kadıköy district on the Asian side of the Bosphorus, one of the oldest inhabited sites in all of Istanbul, with archaeological evidence dating back to the Neolithic period 5,500 years before Christ, Fikirtepe spent the last half-century becoming something else entirely. A dense tangle of informal construction, narrow lanes, illegal apartment blocks piled on top of each other, over 15,000 buildings across 61 city blocks, home to tens of thousands of families. The transformation of Fikirtepe was first announced in 2010. It spans 134 hectares. The new Fikirtepe project, backed by the Ministry of Environment, Urbanization and Climate Change, with $18 billion in investment, will deliver 35,000 new homes, along with workplaces, offices, parks, and an entirely new road network. A 1.6-kilometer prestige road is being built through the heart of it, designed to serve the area for generations. Industry-leading construction companies, Torkum Holding, Kuzu Group, Saya Kalem, are building simultaneously across dozens of parcels. Emlak Konut GYO, the government's flagship real estate subsidiary, is completing projects left unfinished by contractors who ran out of capital. People called Fikirtepe Istanbul's New Manhattan, and looking at what is rising from the rubble, it is not hard to see why. Kirazlitepe, tucked within the Kadıköy district on Istanbul's Asian side, is another neighborhood in the middle of full transformation.
I know this neighborhood personally. This is where I purchased my home. When I first arrived in Istanbul, I was looking for what every serious investor looks for. I'm not a salesman, I'm a resident. I'm an investor who went through the process, the research, the due diligence, the legal steps, the decisions that come with purchasing in a country as a foreigner. If you're watching this and thinking about making a similar move, you can reach out to me and I would be happy to help you in buying property in Turkey, whether for investment, residency, or citizenship.
An emerging urban transformation zone on the Asian side, the same side that now hosts the Istanbul Finance Centre, the same side where property prices in new developments doubled between 2020 and 2024, the same side that is becoming the economic heartbeat of Turkey's most important city. But here's the question that every Istanbulu carries quietly. What happens to the beauty? Istanbul is not just a city of problems to be solved. It is a city of streets that remember empires, of waterfront mansions that watched sultans pass, of mosques designed by architects who understood that a building could be an act of worship, of wooden houses whose shadows have fallen on the same cobblestones for 300 years. And many people, architects, historians, residents, and lovers of this city, are asking whether the speed and scale of urban transformation is destroying something that no earthquake could: the city's soul. The Yalılar, mansions that time must not touch, along both shores of the Bosphorus, stretching from the heart of the city north toward the Black Sea, stands one of the most extraordinary collections of wooden waterfront architecture in the world. They're called Yalılar, waterside mansions. At their peak, nearly 600 of them lined the Bosphorus. Today, approximately 360 remain, and of those, only 150 are preserved in anything close to their original form. These were not ordinary houses. They were the summer palaces of viziers and pashas, of diplomats and poets, of the Ottoman elite, who understood that to live on the Bosphorus was to live at the center of the world. The composer Franz Liszt stayed in one. Sultans commissioned others. The great Balian family, court architects to the Ottoman dynasty for 5 generations, designed many of them. On the Asian side, the villages of Beylerbeyi, Cengelköy, Kandili, Anadolu Hisari, and Vanaköy form a near unbroken chain of this heritage along the water. Beylerbeyi, meaning Lord of Lords, sits just north of the Great Bosphorus Bridge. Here, between the mansions and the tea gardens and the fishing lines hanging over the water, time moves differently. The Beylerbeyi Palace itself, commissioned by Sultan Abdul Aziz in 1871, anchors the village. Around it, surviving Yalalar bear the names of the statesmen who built them. The Mabenchi Fake Bey Mansion, with its unusual twin towers. The Hasib Pasha Mansion, dating to 1825. Not all of Istanbul is open to demolition and rebuilding. There are significant legal firewalls protecting the city's historical fabric, and understanding where those lines are drawn is essential to understanding the full picture of what is happening here. The historic peninsula, the ancient heart of Istanbul, home to Hagia Sophia, the Blue Mosque, the Süleymaniye, Topkapi Palace, and the Byzantine Walls, carries a UNESCO World Heritage designation, inscribed in 1985. 4 distinct zones within this area are protected under international heritage law: the archaeological park around Hagia Sophia, the Süleymaniye quarter, the Zeyrek district with its Ottoman period timber houses, and the Byzantine land walls and their surroundings. Any physical intervention in these zones requires the approval of Turkey's regional conservation councils. New construction must be compatible in scale and character with the existing historic fabric. The Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality established a dedicated conservation implementation and control bureau, known as KUDEB, with 40 staff, including architects, archaeologists, and urban planners, whose sole purpose is oversight of work within these protected areas. The Bosphorus waterfront itself carries its own protections. Low-rise zoning restrictions along the Cengelköy and Üsküdar coastlines mean that supply is permanently constrained. You cannot simply tear down a yali and replace it with a tower block. Height limits, setback rules, and heritage designation orders govern what can and cannot be done within sight of the water. These protections are not perfect. UNESCO has repeatedly flagged concerns about the degradation of Ottoman period timber houses in the Zeyrek and Süleymaniye areas, and about the potential impact of large-scale infrastructure projects on the visual integrity of the historic peninsula. The tension between transformation and preservation is real, and it is ongoing. But the protected zones exist. They are legally enforced. And they are the reason that when you take a Bosphorus ferry today, you still see the waterfront that poets have described for 3 centuries. The debate, glass and steel, or stone and memory, and yet. The debate about architectural identity is not just about the protected zones. It is about everything that surrounds them. About what rises where the gecekondu once stood. About what character the new Istanbul will carry. Walk through parts of the new Fikirtepe, or look at the glass-clad residential towers rising in Bagsalar and Küçükmekke, and you will encounter a style of architecture that could be anywhere. Generic. International. The kind of building that tells you nothing about the city it stands in, the history it replaced, or the culture of the people who will live inside it. Many Istanbulis are not happy about this. Architects, urban planners, and ordinary residents have been vocal in their criticism. The Chamber of Architects of Turkey has repeatedly challenged transformation plans in court. The argument is not against rebuilding. The earthquake argument is too powerful and too real to dismiss. The argument is about how you rebuild, whether the new city you are creating will have the character and beauty and human scale of the city you demolished. A building that survives an earthquake but destroys a neighborhood's identity has solved one problem and created another. Üsküdar and Kirazlitepe, a different approach. But not all new construction in Istanbul is choosing the path of glass and anonymity. In Üsküdar, the ancient Asian district that has stood as a separate settlement since Byzantine times, whose mosques were designed by Mimar Sinan himself, whose waterfront has been one of Istanbul's most beloved for centuries, a different philosophy is being attempted. The Toki Konutları project in Kirazlitepe within Üsküdar is one example of new public housing that has made a deliberate attempt to reference the architectural language of the district it sits within. Stone cladding in warm earth tones, arched window treatments that echo Ottoman residential architecture, building heights calibrated to the scale of the surrounding neighborhood rather than rupturing the skyline. Details, small but significant, that say, we know where we are. Critics will argue that referencing historical style on a mass housing block is superficial, that true architectural continuity requires something deeper than decorative choices. And that argument deserves to be heard. But compared to generic glass towers with no relationship to their context, the effort matters. Üsküdar has always been the more conservative, more traditional face of Istanbul's Asian side. Its residents have a strong sense of the district's identity. And there is a growing argument, from architects, from residents, from cultural figures, that the urban transformation of Üsküdar should be held to a higher standard, precisely because of what the area means to the city's sense of itself. The Kamlika Mosque, completed in 2019 on Üsküdar's highest hill and now the largest mosque in Turkey, was itself designed in a neo-Ottoman style, its cascading domes and 6 minarets, a deliberate echo of the classical Ottoman skyline, visible from most of the Asian side and from across the Bosphorus. Whatever one thinks of its scale, it represents a clear statement that new construction in this part of Istanbul should speak the city's architectural language. Here is the tension at the heart of Istanbul's great transformation. Safety and beauty are not enemies. They do not have to be. Japan, the country whose earthquake engineering Turkey is emulating, did not rebuild its cities as anonymous glass boxes. Kyoto is protected. Kamakura is protected. Even in Tokyo, the new and the ancient coexist in a way that gives the city texture and memory and meaning. Istanbul knows this. Its architects know this. Its residents know this. The question is whether the speed of what is being built will allow beauty to keep pace with safety. That question does not have an answer yet. But the asking of it, loudly, repeatedly, by the people who love this city, is perhaps the most important part of the story. A new city needs more than new buildings. It needs the arteries of a modern metropolis, the infrastructure that moves 16 million people, that connects them to the world, that makes daily life function at a scale that would have seemed impossible 20 years ago. Istanbul Airport, opened in 2018, designed to eventually handle 200 million passengers per year, more than any airport on Earth. Already the third busiest airport in Europe. A single structure so vast it has its own internal subway system. Built on what was forest land in Istanbul's north, connected to the city by new motorways and metro lines still being extended. The Yavuz Sultan Selim Bridge, the third bridge across the Bosphorus, one of the world's tallest suspension bridges at 322 meters, carrying both road traffic and the first rail line on a Bosphorus road bridge, connecting the European and Asian sides of the city, while opening up Istanbul's northern forests to planned development. The Marmaray, a 76.5-kilometer railway that crosses beneath the Bosphorus, 60 meters below the sea, connecting Istanbul from one coast to the other in under 4 minutes. An engineering project that was halted in 2005 when workers discovered a Byzantine-era port beneath the seabed, one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of the 21st century, before continuing to completion. The Eurasia Tunnel, the world's first intercontinental road tunnel, 14.6 kilometers long, running beneath the Bosphorus to connect the two continental sides of the city. Handling 120,000 vehicles per day, it reduced cross-Bosphorus journey times from hours to minutes. The Istanbul Finance Centre, on the Asian side of the city, in Ümraniye and Ataşehir, a new financial district has risen that is already reshaping the economic geography of Turkey and the wider region. 1.3 million square meters of office space across 21 office buildings, 100,000 square meter shopping mall, a congress center, a 5-star hotel, parking for 26,000 vehicles, and up to 100,000 people flowing through it every day. Turkey's central bank has relocated here from Ankara. Borsa Istanbul is here, the banking regulation and supervision agency, every major Turkish bank, and a growing number of international institutions that have recognized Istanbul as what it is becoming, a global financial hub. And then there is the project that exists in the future. Kanal Istanbul, sea-level waterway running north to south through Istanbul's European side, connecting the Black Sea to the Sea of Marmaray, and in doing so, turning European Istanbul into an island. The canal is projected to cost $15 billion to construct. It will handle 160 vessels per day, relieving the Bosphorus of the enormous burden of tanker traffic that currently passes through it, carrying up to 40,000 ships per year. On both banks of the planned canal, 2 entirely new cities are being designed, planned settlements with universities, conference centers, sports facilities, parks, and a projected population of 500,000 people. In 2025 alone, 17 construction tenders were launched in the Sazlibosna area for 12,000 new residences and commercial spaces. When the Suez Canal was built in 1869, it changed the map of global trade. When the Panama Canal opened in 1914, it redrew the routes of the world's navies. Kanal Istanbul, if completed, would do something similar for the geopolitics of the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. Legal battles continue. The Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality and environmental groups have challenged the project in court. The debate is real and it is serious. But the infrastructure investment around the canal corridor, the land, the housing projects, the tender announcements continues at pace. Whatever your position on Kanal Istanbul, it is changing the city before it is even built. Istanbul. Not a city in the desert with no existing population. Not a new capital on empty land. But a city of 16 million people, one of the oldest continually inhabited cities in human history, capital of 3 empires, tearing down itself and rebuilding while people continue to live in it. While it continues to be the economic engine of a nation of 85 million. While it continues to welcome 23 million international tourists per year, making it the second most visited city in the world in 2024. That is a different category of ambition. Most megaprojects build on empty space. Istanbul is rebuilding occupied space. It is performing open-heart surgery on a living city. Behind every statistic in this story is a human being. A family that lived for decades in a building that should have been condemned. A grandmother who didn't know that the walls around her would not survive a magnitude 7 earthquake. A young couple who raised children in a gecekondu they were told one day would be replaced, but never knew when. For many of these families, urban transformation has meant displacement, uncertainty, years of waiting in temporary housing, and, for some, the feeling that their community and culture were erased alongside the rubble of their homes. These are real costs. They deserve to be named. But for many others, it has meant something they never expected. The first time in their lives living in a building that meets safety standards. An elevator, double-glazed windows, insulated walls, a lobby, a park outside the door, a building that will not fall on their children. The new developments rising across Istanbul are not identical towers with no soul. The best of them, and there are many, are complex communities, underground parking, swimming pools, social facilities, landscaped gardens, designed by architects working to codes that did not exist a decade ago. And for investors and newcomers, they represent something else again. The chance to buy into a city that is, in the most literal sense, being made new. The lesson is written in rubble. Istanbul is reading it. There have always been cities that defined their era. Rome built aqueducts that outlasted empires. Paris built boulevards that rearranged the imagination of an entire civilization. New York built skyscrapers that told a generation what ambition looked like in steel and glass. Istanbul is building something different, something harder to see in a single skyline photograph, something that takes time to understand. It is not building monuments, it is building safety. It is replacing the fragile with the resilient. It is performing the most unglamorous kind of ambition, the kind that says, we will tear down what we built in haste and build it again, correctly, because the people who live here deserve to survive what is coming. That is the story no single crane tells, no single building tells, no single district tells. But looking at all of it together, the 15,000 buildings flattened in Fikirtepe, the nearly 1 million homes already rebuilt, the seismic isolators in the basements of hospitals that stayed standing while the earth moved, the finance center rising on the Asian shore, the third bridge spanning the strait, the airport serving a continent, looking at all of it. Istanbul is not just rebuilding its buildings, it is rebuilding its future.